Hi, my name is Scott Lilly. This is my introductory video for the Air Power Study Facilitated course. I'm a civilian at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I currently work in the contracting office for the Global Hawk program, and prior to that, I worked in the contracting office for the Air Force Research Labs. So, the key takeaway that I got from our readings leading into this course is that due to changes in the nature of war, being that the rise of technology, the increase in our adversaries using non conventional tactics, technology, cyberspace, or cyber warfare, that the traditional lines in which we've been able to view the world and combat in general have now been blurred. This was highlighted by the author Thomas Ricks in The Future of War. As the nature of war changes, the familiar dividing lines of our world are blurring across the board. And in his article, he highlights the blurring of military and criminal, in which terrorists are now being tried in civilian courts. He also highlighted civilian and military roles as blurring. We can look at the reconstruction of Afghanistan and how civilian personnel are being utilized there. Was a key example that the author gave. Another example is the public and private lines being blurred. This one, the author focused on a hypothetical in which a private contractor is involved in the CIA drone program. There's a drone strike, a civilian is killed. Could that private contractor now be charged with murder? The author didn't necessarily state where he came down on the issue, but it is a very interesting hypothetical. Another one would be if we were to be attacked, or if our via cyberspace, or if somebody was to launch a cyber attack upon us, how we would respond. Um, one would be, or one possible solution is that which is proffered by Jonah Goldberg of National Review, and that we would issue letters of marque to private individuals and allow them to then respond by launching their own cyber attacks against the adversary that first targeted us. Letters of marque, while being um, old school in the sense that they are mentioned in the U.S. Constitution, this would definitely put a new twist and continue to blur that private and public line that's already been blurred. Another example of this blurring would be in military and intelligence. Those lines are now blurring, with the CIA in some ways carrying out more military operations than they ever have before, not being purely an intelligence gathering organization. Then we have domestic and foreign. And finally, the traditional concept of sovereignty in and of itself is being blurred. If we look at the rise of non-state actors, uh, how do you respond when a non-state actor is the one that launches a cyber attack against you? Um, do you respond by cutting out the power in the city they're located in, when that country may have no knowledge or no way of actually controlling those non-state actors? I thought this article did a great job in just highlighting the issues that we now face in the modern world, and how our traditional lines have been blurred. So next would be, what do I believe the most critical issue for air power in a national security sense now that we now face. And to me, the most critical issue that we now face is our inability to fight a major conflict, or our lack of preparedness for it. This was highlighted in the article Preparing for the Next Big War. In this, the authors highlighted there were 6 shortcomings or gaps that the United States would need to fill and start preparing for us to be ready for the next major conflict. And those gaps were precision munitions and advanced weaponry. Platforms, thankfully, the second would be platforms. Thankfully, in our previous engagements, for the most part, in recent history, we've kind of made it through unscathed, and losing aircraft, ships, tanks, things of that nature. That would change if we were to have to engage in a major conflict with a major power in the world. Third, troops. We at this point wouldn't have enough soldiers, sailors, airmen, or Marines to engage in a major conflict. That would require us to go into a draft if we don't prepare, and we may have to anyway. But the authors highlighted that planning and adaptability, making sure that we are able to adapt in the change that would naturally occur in a major war. Technology, going back to the cyber, the idea that we would have to also be engaged on that front as well, which is a new front, a front that we haven't had to experience in a major conflict, would also be a challenge to our leaders. And finally, stamina, preparing the country to be ready for large losses and things of that nature. And then going back, let's go back to troops and platforms here. Uh, this problem is very acute for the Air Force in that um, we have a current shortage of fighter pilots. This was brought up in the Military Times in an article called "The Stunning Fighter Pilot Shortage." This article was by Stephen Luzzi, and it came out 11 April of 2018, in which he pointed out that 1 in 4 billets for fighter pilots across the Air Force, Marine Corps, and the Navy are not being filled. Now, if we were to enter a major conflict right now, that would definitely be a problem, because this isn't one of those things that we could just snap our fingers and fix. It takes roughly 5 years to train a fighter pilot. And if we don't start preparing now for the major conflicts, we won't have the ability to just, like I said, snap your fingers and bam, we have a sufficient number of Air Force fighter pilots. And this is especially true considering our current levels in troops, as we also discussed, isn't at the level that would be necessary to engage in this conflict, and that does become a very critical issue for us, especially as China continues its rise in the world and shows aggression in the South China Sea, and of course the Korean Peninsula always being a hotspot. While the possibility of us engaging in a major conflict is low, it's not zero, and the consequences for being unprepared would be catastrophic, and that's why I deem that to be the most critical issue facing the Air Force or air power in a national security sense.